Hello, and welcome back to the Drowsy Raven, a quiet corner of the night where stories whisper through the dark, and dreams are stitched together from the oldest of words. Tonight, we walk into the woods, not the kind in bright picture books, but the shadowed forest of old, the one where brothers vanish, swans wear spells, and trees remember everything. These are the fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, tales passed down in low voices, told by firelight and softened by time, but still holding their wild, strange heart. Let the wind carry you, let the moss cradle your thoughts, and let the stories begin. Close your eyes, and sleep, if you can, beneath the boughs of the dark woods. Once upon a time, there were a king and a queen. They lived happily together and had 12 children, all boys. One day, the king said to his wife, "If our 13th child, which you are soon going to bring into the world, is a girl, then the 12 others shall die, so that her wealth may be great, and so that she alone may inherit the kingdom." Indeed, he had 12 coffins made. They were filled with wood shavings, and each was fitted with a coffin pillow. He had them put in a locked room, and gave the key to the queen, ordering her to tell no one about them. The mother sat and mourned the entire day, until the youngest son, who was always with her, and who was named Benjamin after the Bible, said to her, "Dear mother, why are you so sad?" "Dearest child," she answered, "I cannot tell you." However, he would not leave her in peace until she unlocked the room and showed him the coffins, already filled with wood shavings. Then she said, "My dearest Benjamin, your father had these coffins made for you and your 11 brothers. If I bring a girl into the world, you are all to be killed and buried in them." As she spoke and cried, her son comforted her, saying, "Don't cry, dear mother. We will take care of ourselves and run away." Then she said, "Go out into the woods with your 11 brothers. One of you should climb the highest tree that you can find. Keep watch there, and look toward the castle tower. If I give birth to a little son, I will raise a white flag. If I give birth to a little daughter, I will raise a red flag. And then you should escape as fast as you can, and may God protect you. I will get up every night and pray for you, in the winter that you may find yourselves near a fire, and in the summer that you may not suffer from the heat." After she had blessed her children, they went out into the woods. One after the other of them kept watch, sitting atop the highest oak tree and looking toward the tower. After 11 days had passed, and it was Benjamin's turn, he saw that a flag had been raised. It was not the white one, but instead the red blood flag, decreeing that they were all to die. When the boys heard this, they became angry and cried out, "Are we to suffer death for the sake of a girl? We swear that we will take revenge. Wherever we find a girl, her red blood shall flow." Then they went deeper into the woods, and in its middle, where it was darkest, they found a little bewitched house that was empty. They said, "We will live here. You, Benjamin, you are the youngest and weakest. You shall stay at home and keep house. We others will go and get things to eat." Thus they went into the woods and shot rabbits, wild deer, birds, and doves, and whatever they could eat. These they brought to Benjamin, and he had to prepare them to satisfy their hunger. They lived together in this little house for 10 years. But the time passed quickly for them. The little daughter that their mother, the queen, had given birth to was now grown up. She had a good heart, a beautiful face, and a golden star on her forehead. Once on a large wash day, she saw 12 men's shirts in the laundry and asked her mother, "Whose are these 12 shirts? They are much too small for father." The queen answered with a heavy heart, "Dear child, they belong to your 12 brothers." The girl said, "Where are my 12 brothers? I have never even heard of them." She answered, "Only God knows where they are. They are wandering about in the world." Then she took the girl, unlocked the room for her, and showed her the 12 coffins with the wood shavings and the coffin pillows. "These coffins," she said, "were intended for your brothers, but they secretly ran away before you were born." And she told her how everything happened. Then the girl said, "Dear mother, don't cry. I will go and look for my brothers." Then she took the 12 shirts and went forth into the great woods. She walked the entire day, in the evening coming to the bewitched little house. She went inside and found a young lad, who asked, "Where do you come from, and where are you going?" He was astounded that she was so beautiful, that she was wearing royal clothing, and that she had a star on her forehead. "I am a princess, and I am looking for my 12 brothers. I will walk on as long as the sky is blue until I find them." She also showed him the 12 shirts that belonged to them. Benjamin saw that it was his sister, and said, "I am Benjamin, your youngest brother." She began to cry for joy, and Benjamin did so as well. They kissed and embraced one another with great love. Then he said, "Dear sister, I must warn you that we have agreed that every girl whom we meet must die." She said, "I will gladly die, if I can thus redeem my 12 brothers." "No," he answered, "you shall not die. Sit under this tub until our 11 brothers come, and I will make it right with them." She did this, and when night fell, they came home from the hunt. As they sat at the table eating, they asked, "What is new?" Benjamin said, "Don't you know anything?" "No," they answered. He continued speaking. "You have been in the woods while I stayed at home, but I know more than you." "Then tell us," they shouted. He answered, "If you will promise me that the next girl we meet shall not be killed." "Yes," they all shouted. "We will show her mercy, just tell us." Then he said, "Our sister is here," and lifted up the tub. The princess came forth in her royal clothing, with the golden star on her forehead, so beautiful, delicate, and fine. They all rejoiced, falling around her neck and kissing her, and they loved her with all their hearts. Now she stayed at home with Benjamin and helped him with the work. The 11 went into the woods and captured wild game, deer, birds, and doves, so they would have something to eat. Their sister and Benjamin prepared it all. They gathered wood for cooking, herbs for the stew, and put the pot onto the fire so a meal was always ready when the 11 came home. She also kept the house in order, and made up the beds white and clean. The brothers were always satisfied, and they lived happily with her. One time the 2 of them had prepared a good meal at home, and so they sat together and ate and drank and were ever so happy. Now there was a little garden next to the bewitched house, and in it there were 12 lilies, the kind that are called students. Wanting to bring some pleasure to her brothers, she picked the 12 flowers, intending to give one to each of them while they were eating. But in the same instant that she picked the flowers, the 12 brothers were transformed into 12 ravens, and they flew away above the woods. The house and the garden disappeared as well. Now the poor girl was alone in the wild woods. Looking around, she saw an old woman standing next to her. The old woman said, "My child, what have you done? Why did you not leave the 12 white flowers standing? Those were your brothers, and now they have been transformed into ravens forever." The girl said, crying, "Is there no way to redeem them?" "No," said the old woman. "There is only one way in the world, and it is so difficult that you will never redeem them. You must remain silent for 7 whole years, neither speaking nor laughing. If you speak a single word, even if all but 1 hour of the 7 years has passed, then it will all be for nothing, and your brothers will be killed by that one word." Then the girl said in her heart, "I know for sure that I will redeem my brothers." She went and found a tall tree and climbed to its top, where she sat and span, without speaking and without laughing. Now it came to pass that a king was hunting in these woods. He had a large greyhound that ran to the tree where the girl was sitting. It jumped about, yelping and barking up the tree. The king came, saw the beautiful princess with the golden star on her forehead, and was so enchanted by her beauty that he shouted up to her, asking her to become his wife. She gave him no answer, but nodded with her head. Then he himself climbed the tree, carried her down, set her on his horse, and took her home with him. Their wedding was celebrated with great pomp and joy, but the bride neither spoke nor laughed. After they had lived a few years happily together, the king's mother, who was a wicked woman, began to slander the young queen, saying to the king, "You have brought home a common beggar woman for yourself. Who knows what kind of godless things she is secretly doing? Even if she is a mute and cannot speak, she could at least laugh. Anyone who does not laugh has an evil conscience." At first the king did not want to believe this, but the old woman kept it up for so long, accusing her of so many wicked things, that the king finally let himself be convinced, and he sentenced her to death. A great fire was lit in the courtyard, where she was to be burned to death. The king stood upstairs at his window, looking on with crying eyes, for he still loved her dearly. She had already been bound to the stake, and the fire was licking at her clothing with its red tongues, when the last moment of the 7 years passed. A whirring sound was heard in the air, and 12 ravens approached, landing together. As they touched the earth, it was her 12 brothers whom she had redeemed. They ripped the fire apart, put out the flames, and freed their sister, kissing and embracing her. Now that she could open her mouth and speak, she told the king why she had remained silent and had never laughed. The king rejoiced to hear that she was innocent, and they all lived happily together until they died. The wicked stepmother was brought before the court and placed in a barrel filled with boiling oil and poisonous snakes, and she died an evil death. Long ago, at least 2,000 years, there was a rich man who had a beautiful and pious wife, and they loved each other dearly. However, they had no children, though they wished very much to have some. And the woman prayed for them day and night, but they didn't get any, and they didn't get any. In front of their house there was a courtyard where there stood a juniper tree. One day in winter the woman was standing beneath it, peeling herself an apple. And while she was thus peeling the apple, she cut her finger, and the blood fell into the snow. "Oh," the woman said. She sighed heavily, looking at the blood before her, and was most unhappy. "If only I had a child as red as blood and as white as snow." And as she said that, she became quite contented, and felt sure that it was going to happen. Then she went into the house, and a month went by, and the snow was gone. And 2 months, and everything was green, and 3 months, and all flowers came out from the earth. And 4 months, and all the trees in the woods grew thicker, and the green branches were all entwined in one another, and the birds sang until the woods resounded and the blossoms fell from the trees. Then the 5th month passed, and she stood beneath the juniper tree, which smelled so sweet that her heart jumped for joy, and she fell on her knees and was beside herself. And when the 6th month was over, the fruit was thick and large. And then she was quite still. And after the 7th month she picked the juniper berries and ate them greedily. Then she grew sick and sorrowful. Then the 8th month passed, and she called her husband to her and cried, and said, "If I die, then bury me beneath the juniper tree." Then she was quite comforted and happy until the next month was over. And then she had a child as white as snow and as red as blood. And when she saw it, she was so happy that she died. Her husband buried her beneath the juniper tree, and began to cry bitterly. After some time he was more at ease, and although he still cried, he could bear it. And some time later he took another wife. He had a daughter by the second wife, but the first wife's child was a little son, and he was as red as blood and as white as snow. When the woman looked at her daughter, she loved her very much, but then she looked at the little boy, and it pierced her heart, for she thought that he would always stand in her way, and she was always thinking how she could get the entire inheritance for her daughter. And the evil one filled her mind with this until she grew very angry with the little boy. And she pushed him from one corner to the other, and slapped him here and cuffed him there, until the poor child was always afraid. For when he came home from school, there was nowhere he could find any peace. One day, the woman had gone upstairs to her room, when her little daughter came up too and said, "Mother, give me an apple." "Yes, my child," said the woman, and gave her a beautiful apple out of the chest. The chest had a large, heavy lid, with a large, sharp iron lock. "Mother," said the little daughter, "is brother not to have one too?" This made the woman angry, but she said, "Yes, when he comes home from school." When from the window she saw him coming, it was as though the evil one came over her, and she grabbed the apple and took it away from her daughter, saying, "You shall not have one before your brother." She threw the apple into the chest and shut it. Then the little boy came in the door, and the evil one made her say to him kindly, "My son, do you want an apple?" And she looked at him fiercely. "Mother," said the little boy, "how angry you look. Yes, give me an apple." Then it seemed to her as if she had to persuade him. "Come with me," she said, opening the lid of the chest. "Take out an apple for yourself." And while the little boy was leaning over, the evil one prompted her, and crash! She slammed down the lid, and his head flew off, falling among the red apples. Then fear overcame her, and she thought, "Maybe I can get out of this." So she went upstairs to her room, to her chest of drawers, and took a white scarf out of her top drawer, and set the head on the neck again, tying the scarf around it so that nothing could be seen. Then she set him on a chair in front of the door and put the apple in his hand. After this, Marlene came into the kitchen to her mother, who was standing by the fire with a pot of hot water before her, which she was stirring around and round. "Mother," said Marlene, "brother is sitting at the door, and he looks totally white and has an apple in his hand. I asked him to give me the apple, but he did not answer me, and I was very frightened." "Go back to him," said her mother, "and if he will not answer you, then box his ears." So Marlene went to him and said, "Brother, give me the apple." But he was silent, so she gave him one on the ear, and his head fell off. Marlene was terrified, began crying and screaming, and ran to her mother, and said, "Oh, mother, I have knocked my brother's head off." And she cried and could not be comforted. "Marlene," said the mother, "what have you done?" "Be quiet and don't let anyone know about it. It cannot be helped now, but we will cook him into stew." Then the mother took the little boy and chopped him into pieces, put him into the pot, and cooked him into stew. But Marlene stood by crying, and her tears fell into the pot, and they did not need any salt. Then the father came home and sat down at the table and said, "Where is my son?" And the mother served up a large dish of stew, and Marlene cried and could not stop. Then the father said again, "Where is my son?" "Oh," said the mother, "he has gone across the country to his mother's great uncle. He will stay there a while." "What is he doing there? He did not even say goodbye to me." "Oh, he wanted to go, and he asked me if he could stay 6 weeks. He will be well taken care of there." "Oh," said the man, "I am unhappy. It isn't right. He should have said goodbye to me." With that he began to eat, saying, "Marlene, why are you crying? Your brother will certainly come back." Then he said, "Wife, this food is delicious. Give me some more." And the more he ate, the more he wanted. And he said, "Give me some more. You two shall have none of it. It seems to me as if it were all mine." And he ate and ate, throwing all the bones under the table until he had finished it all. Marlene went to her chest of drawers, took her best silk scarf from the bottom drawer, and gathered all the bones from beneath the table, tied them up in her silk scarf, then carried them outside the door, crying tears of blood. She laid them down beneath the juniper tree on the green grass, and after she had put them there, she suddenly felt better and did not cry anymore. Then the juniper tree began to move. The branches moved apart, then moved together again, just as if someone were rejoicing and clapping his hands. At the same time, a mist seemed to rise from the tree, and in the center of this mist it burned like a fire, and a beautiful bird flew out of the fire, singing magnificently, and it flew high into the air, and when it was gone, the juniper tree was just as it had been before, and the cloth with the bones was no longer there. Marlene, however, was as happy and contented as if her brother were still alive, and she went merrily into the house, sat down at the table, and ate. Then the bird flew away, and lit on a goldsmith's house, and began to sing. "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." The goldsmith was sitting in his workshop making a golden chain when he heard the bird sitting on his roof and singing. The song seemed very beautiful to him. He stood up, but as he crossed the threshold, he lost one of his slippers. However, he went right up to the middle of the street with only one slipper and one sock on. He had his leather apron on, and in one hand he had a golden chain, and in the other his tongs. The sun was shining brightly on the street. He walked onward, then stood still and said to the bird, "Bird," he said, "how beautifully you can sing. Sing that piece again for me." "No," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. Give me the golden chain, and then I will sing it again for you." The goldsmith said, "Here's the golden chain for you. Now sing that song again for me." Then the bird came and took the golden chain in his right claw, and went and sat in front of the goldsmith and sang. "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." Then flew away to the shoemaker and lit on his roof and sang, "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." Hearing this, the shoemaker ran out his doors in shirt sleeves and looked up at his roof, and had to hold his hand in front of his eyes to keep from the sun blinding him. "Bird," said he, "how beautifully you can sing." Then he called in at his door, "Wife, come outside. There is a bird here. Look at this bird. He can certainly sing." Then he called his daughter and his children, and the journeyman, and the apprentice, and the maid, and they all came out into the street and looked at the bird, and saw how beautiful he was, and what fine red and green feathers he had, and how his neck was like pure gold, and how his eyes shone like stars in his head. "Bird," said the shoemaker, "now sing that song again for me." "No," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. You must give me something." "Wife," said the man, "go into the shop. There's a pair of red shoes on the top shelf. Bring them down." Then the wife went and brought the shoes. "There, bird," said the man, "now sing that piece again for me." Then the bird came and took the shoes in his left claw and flew back to the roof and sang, "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." When he had finished his song, he flew away. In his right claw he had the chain, and in his left one the shoes. He flew far away to a mill, and the mill went clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. In the mill sat 20 miller's apprentices cutting a stone, and chiseling, chip-chop, chip-chop, chip-chop. And when the mill went clickety-clack, 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 then the bird went on and sat on a linden tree which stood in front of the mill and sang, "My mother, she killed me." Then one of them stopped working. "My father, he ate me." Then 2 more stopped working and listened. "My sister Marlene." Then 4 more stopped. "Gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf." Now only 8 were chiseling. "Laid them beneath." Now only 5. "The juniper tree." Now only 1. "Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." Then the last one stopped also and heard the last words. "Bird," he said, "how beautifully you can sing. Let me hear that too. Sing it once more for me." "No," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. Give me the millstone, and then I will sing it again." "Yes," he said. "If it belonged only to me, you should have it." "Yes," said the others, "if he sings again, he can have it." Then the bird came down, and the 20 millers took a beam and lifted the stone up. "Yo, heave ho! Yo, heave ho! Yo, heave ho!" The bird stuck his neck through the hole and put the stone on as if it were a collar, then flew to the tree again and sang, "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister Marlene gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I." When he was finished singing, he spread his wings, and in his right claw he had the chain, and in his left one the shoes, and around his neck the millstone. He flew far away to his father's house. In the room, the father, the mother, and Marlene were sitting at the table. The father said, I feel so contented. I am so happy." "Not I," said the mother. "I feel uneasy, just as if a bad storm were coming." But Marlene just sat and cried and cried. Then the bird flew up, and as it seated itself on the roof, the father said, "Oh, I feel so truly happy, and the sun is shining so beautifully outside. I feel as if I were about to see some old acquaintance again." "Not I," said the woman. "I am so afraid that my teeth are chattering. I feel like I have a fire in my veins." And she tore open her bodice even more. Marlene sat in a corner crying. She held a handkerchief before her eyes and cried until it was wet clear through. Then the bird seated itself on the juniper tree and sang, "My mother, she killed me." The mother stopped her ears and shut her eyes, not wanting to see or hear, but there was a roaring in her ears like the fiercest storm, and her eyes burned and flashed like lightning. "My father, he ate me." "Oh, mother," said the man, "this is a beautiful bird. He is singing so splendidly, and the sun is shining so warmly, and it smells like pure cinnamon. My sister Marlene." Then Marlene laid her head on her knees and cried and cried. But the man said, "I am going out. I must see the bird up close." "Oh, don't go," said the woman. "I feel as if the whole house were shaking and on fire." But the man went out and looked at the bird, gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. With this the bird dropped the golden chain, and it fell right around the man's neck, so exactly around it that it fit beautifully. Then the man went in and said, "Just look at what a beautiful bird this is, and what a beautiful golden chain he has given me. How nice it looks." But the woman was terrified. She fell down on the floor in the room, and her cap fell off her head. Then the bird sang once more, "My mother killed me. I wish I were 1,000 fathoms beneath the earth, so I would not have to hear that. My father, he ate me." Then the woman fell down as if she were dead. "My sister Marlene." "Oh," said Marlene, "I too will go out and see if the bird will give me something." Then she went out, gathered all my bones, tied them in a silken scarf. He threw the shoes down to her, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Tweet, tweet, what a beautiful bird am I. Then she was contented and happy. She put on the new red shoes and danced and leaped into the house. "Oh," she said, "I was so sad when I went out, and now I am so contented. That is a splendid bird. He has given me a pair of red shoes." "No," said the woman, jumping to her feet with her hair standing up like flames of fire. "I feel as if the world were coming to an end. I too will go out and see if it makes me feel better." And as she went out the door, crash! The bird threw the millstone on her head and it crushed her to death. The father and Marlene heard it and went out. Smoke, flames, and fire were rising from the place. And when that was over, the little brother was standing there, and he took his father and Marlene by the hand, and all three were very happy. And they went into the house, sat down at the table, and ate. In olden times, when wishing still did some good, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful. But the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, who, indeed, had seen so much, marveled every time it shone upon her face. In the vicinity of the king's castle, there was a large, dark forest. And in this forest, beneath an old linden tree, there was a well. In the heat of the day, the princess would go out into the forest and sit on the edge of the cool well. To pass the time, she would take a golden ball, throw it into the air, and then catch it. It was her favorite plaything. Now one day it happened that the princess's golden ball did not fall into her hands, that she held up high, but instead it fell to the ground and rolled right into the water. The princess followed it with her eyes, but the ball disappeared, and the well was so deep that she could not see its bottom. Then she began to cry. She cried louder and louder, and she could not console herself. As she was thus lamenting, someone called out to her, "What is the matter with you, princess? Your crying would turn a stone to pity." She looked around to see where the voice was coming from and saw a frog, who had stuck his thick, ugly head out of the water. "Oh, it's you, old water splasher," she said. "I am crying because my golden ball has fallen into the well." "Be still and stop crying," answered the frog. "I can help you. But what will you give me if I bring back your plaything?" "Whatever you want, dear frog," she said. "My clothes, my pearls, and precious stones, and even the golden crown that I am wearing." The frog answered, "I do not want your clothes, your pearls, precious stones, nor your golden crown. But if you will love me and accept me as a companion and playmate, and let me sit next to you at your table and eat from your golden plate and drink from your cup and sleep in your bed, if you will promise this to me, then I'll dive down and bring your golden ball back to you." "Oh yes," she said, "I promise all of that to you if you will just bring my ball back to me." But she thought, what is this stupid frog trying to say? He just sits here in the water with his own kind and croaks. He cannot be a companion to a human. As soon as the frog heard her say yes, he stuck his head under and dove to the bottom. He paddled back up a short time later with the golden ball in his mouth and threw it onto the grass. The princess was filled with joy when she saw her beautiful plaything once again, picked it up, and ran off. "Wait, wait!" called the frog. "Take me along. I cannot run as fast as you." But what did it help him that he croaked out after her as loudly as he could? She paid no attention to him, but instead hurried home and soon forgot the poor frog, who had returned again to its well. The next day the princess was sitting at the table with the king and all the people of the court, and was eating from her golden plate when something came creeping up the marble steps. Plip, plop, plip, plop. As soon as it reached the top, there came a knock at the door and a voice called out, "Princess, youngest, open the door for me." She ran to see who was outside. She opened the door, and the frog was sitting there. Frightened, she slammed the door shut and returned to the table. The king saw that her heart was pounding and asked, "My child, why are you afraid? Is there a giant outside the door who wants to get you?" "Oh no," she answered. "It is a disgusting frog." "What does the frog want from you?" "Oh, father dear, yesterday when I was sitting near the well in the forest and playing, my golden ball fell into the water, and because I was crying so much, the frog brought it back. And because he insisted, I promised him that he could be my companion. But I didn't think that he could leave his water, but now he is just outside the door and wants to come in." Just then came a second knock at the door, and a voice called out, "Youngest daughter of the king, open up the door for me. Don't you know what yesterday you said to me down by the well? Youngest daughter of the king, open up the door for me." The king said, "What you have promised you must keep. Go let the frog in." She went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in, and then followed her up to her chair. He sat there and called out, "Lift me up next to you." She hesitated, until finally the king commanded her to do it. When the frog was seated next to her, he said, "Now push your golden plate closer so we can eat together." She did it, but one could see that she did not want to. The frog enjoyed his meal, but for her every bite stuck in her throat. Finally he said, "I have eaten all I want and am tired. Now carry me to your room and make your bed so that we can go to sleep." The princess began to cry, and was afraid of the cold frog, and did not dare to even touch him. And yet he was supposed to sleep in her beautiful, clean bed. The king became angry and said, "You should not despise someone who has helped you in time of need." She picked him up with 2 fingers, carried him upstairs, and sat him in a corner. As she was lying in bed, he came creeping up to her and said, "I am tired, and I want to sleep as well as you do. Pick me up, or I'll tell your father." With that, she became bitterly angry and threw him against the wall with all her might. "Now you will have your peace, you disgusting frog." But when he fell down, he was not a frog, but a prince with beautiful, friendly eyes, and he was now, according to her father's will, her dear companion and husband. He told her how he had been enchanted by a wicked witch, and that she alone could have rescued him from the well, and that tomorrow they would go together to his kingdom. Then they fell asleep. The next morning, just as the sun was waking them, a carriage pulled up, drawn by 8 horses. They had white ostrich feathers on their heads and were outfitted with chains of gold. At the rear stood the young king's servant, faithful Heinrich. Faithful Heinrich had been so saddened by his master's transformation into a frog that he had to place 3 iron bands around his heart to keep it from bursting in grief and sorrow. The carriage was to take the king back to his kingdom. Faithful Heinrich lifted them both inside and took his place at the rear. He was filled with joy over the redemption. After they had gone a short distance, the prince heard a crack from behind as though something had broken. He turned around and said, "Heinrich, the carriage is breaking apart." "No, my lord, the carriage it's not, but one of the bands surrounding my heart that suffered such great pain while you were sitting in the well when you were a frog." Once again, and then once again, the prince heard a cracking sound and thought the carriage was breaking apart. But it was the bands springing from faithful Heinrich's heart, because his master was now redeemed and happy. A king was once hunting in a great forest, and he chased his prey so eagerly that none of his men could follow him. As evening approached, he stopped and looked around, and saw that he was lost. He looked for a way out of the woods, but he could not find one. Then he saw an old woman with a bobbing head who approached him. She was a witch. "My dear woman," he said to her, "can you show me the way through the woods?" "Oh yes, your majesty," she answered, "I can indeed. However, there is one condition, and if you do not fulfill it, you will never get out of these woods, and will die here of hunger." "What sort of condition is it?" asked the king. "I have a daughter," said the old woman, "who is as beautiful as anyone you could find in all the world, and who well deserves to become your wife. If you will make her your queen, I will show you the way out of the woods." The king was so frightened that he consented, and the old woman led her to her cottage, where her daughter was sitting by the fire. She received the king as if she had been expecting him. He saw that she was very beautiful, but in spite of this he did not like her, and he could not look at her without secretly shuddering. After he had lifted the girl onto his horse, the old woman showed him the way, and the king arrived again at his royal castle where the wedding was celebrated. The king had been married before, and by his first wife he had 7 children, 6 boys and 1 girl. He loved them more than anything else in the world. Fearing that the stepmother might not treat them well, even do them harm, he took them to a secluded castle which stood in the middle of a forest. It was so well hidden, and the way was so difficult to find, that he himself would not have found it if a wise woman had not given him a ball of magic yarn. Whenever he threw it down in front of him, it would unwind itself and show him the way. However, the king went out to his dear children so often that the queen took notice of his absence. She was curious and wanted to know what he was doing all alone in the woods. She gave a large sum of money to his servants, and they revealed the secret to her. They also told her about the ball of yarn, which could point out the way all by itself. She did not rest until she had discovered where the king had kept the ball of yarn. She then made some little shirts of white silk. Having learned the art of witchcraft from her mother, she sewed a magic charm into each one of them. Then one day when the king had ridden out hunting, she took the little shirts and went into the woods. The ball of yarn showed her the way. The children, seeing that someone was approaching from afar, thought that their dear father was coming to them. Full of joy, they ran to meet him. Then she threw one of the shirts over each of them, and when the shirts touched their bodies, they were transformed into swans, and they flew away over the woods. The queen went home very pleased, believing that she had gotten rid of her stepchildren. However, the girl had not run out with her brothers, and the queen knew nothing about her. The next day the king went to visit his children, but he found no one there but the girl. "Where are your brothers?" asked the king. "Oh, dear father," she answered, "they have gone away and left me alone." Then she told him that from her window she had seen how her brothers had flown away over the woods as swans. She showed him the feathers that they had dropped in the courtyard, and which she had gathered up. The king mourned, but he did not think the queen had done this wicked deed. Fearing that the girl would be stolen away from him as well, he wanted to take her away with him, but she was afraid of her stepmother, and begged the king to let her stay just this one more night in the castle. The poor girl thought, "I can no longer stay here. I will go and look for my brothers." And when night came, she ran away and went straight into the woods. She walked the whole night long without stopping, and the next day as well, until she was too tired to walk any further. Then she saw a hunter's hut and went inside. She found a room with 6 little beds, but she did not dare get into one of them. Instead, she crawled under one of them and lay down on the hard ground, where she was intended to spend the night. The sun was about to go down when she heard a rushing sound and saw 6 swans fly in through the window. Landing on the floor, they blew on one another and blew all their feathers off. Their swan skins came off just like shirts. The girl looked at them and recognized her brothers. She was happy and crawled out from beneath the bed. The brothers were no less happy to see their little sister, but their happiness did not last long. "You cannot stay here," they said to her. "This is a robber's den. If they come home and find you, they will murder you." "Can't you protect me?" asked the little sister. "No," they answered. "We can take off our swan skins for only a quarter hour each evening. Only during that time do we have our human forms. After that, we are again transformed into swans." Crying, the little sister said, "Can you not be redeemed?" "Alas, no," they answered. "The conditions are too difficult. You would not be allowed to speak or laugh for 6 years, and in that time you would have to sew together 6 little shirts from asters for us. And if a single word were to come from your mouth, all your work would be lost." After the brothers had said this, the quarter hour was over, and they flew out the window again as swans. Nevertheless, the girl firmly resolved to redeem her brothers, even if it should cost her her life. She left the hunter's hut, went to the middle of the woods, seated herself in a tree, and there spent the night. The next morning she went out and gathered asters and began to sew. She could not speak with anyone, and she had no desire to laugh. She sat there, looking only at her work. After she had already spent a long time there, it happened that the king of the land was hunting in these woods. His huntsmen came to the tree where the girl was sitting. They called to her, saying, "Who are you?" But she did not answer. "Come down to us," they said. "We will not harm you." She only shook her head. When they pressed her further with questions, she threw her golden necklace down to them, thinking that would satisfy them. But they did not stop. So she then threw down her belt to them. When this did not help, her garters, and then one thing at a time, everything that she had on and could do without, until finally she was left with nothing but her shift. The huntsmen, however, not letting themselves be dissuaded, climbed the tree, lifted the girl down, and took her to the king. The king asked, "Who are you? What are you doing in that tree?" But she did not answer. He asked her in every language that he knew, but she remained as speechless as a fish. Because she was so beautiful, the king's heart was touched, and he fell deeply in love with her. He put his cloak around her, lifted her onto his horse in front of himself, and took her to his castle. There he had her dressed in rich garments, and she glistened in her beauty like bright daylight, but no one could get a word from her. At the table he seated her by his side, and her modest manners and courtesy pleased him so much that he said, "My desire is to marry her, and no one else in this world." A few days later they were married. Now the king had a wicked mother who was dissatisfied with the marriage and spoke ill of the young queen. "Who knows," she said, "where the girl who cannot speak comes from? She is not worthy of a king." A year later, after the queen had brought her first child into the world, the old woman took it away from her while she was asleep and smeared her mouth with blood. Then she went to the king and accused her of being a cannibal. The king could not believe this and would not allow anyone to harm her. She, however, sat the whole time sewing on the shirts and caring for nothing else. The next time, when again she gave birth to a beautiful boy, the deceitful mother-in-law did the same thing again, but the king could not bring herself to believe her accusations. He said, "She is too pious and good to do anything like that. If she were not speechless and if she could defend herself, her innocence would come to light." But when the old woman stole away a newly born child for the 3rd time and accused the queen, who did not defend herself with a single word, the king had no choice but to bring her to justice, and she was sentenced to die by fire. When the day came for the sentence to be carried out, it was also the last day of 6 years during which she had not been permitted to speak or laugh, and she had thus delivered her dear brothers from the magic curse. The 6 shirts were finished. Only the left sleeve of the last one was missing. When she was led to the stake, she laid the shirts on her arm. Standing there, as the fire was about to be lighted, she looked around, and 6 swans came flying through the air. Seeing that their redemption was near, her heart leapt with joy. The swans rushed towards her, swooping down so that she could throw the shirts over them. And as soon as the shirts touched them, their swan skins fell off, and her brothers stood before her in their own bodies, vigorous and handsome. However, the youngest was missing his left arm. In its place, he had a swan's wing. They embraced and kissed one another. Then the queen went to the king, who was greatly moved, and she began to speak, saying, "Dearest husband, now I may speak and reveal to you that I am innocent and falsely accused." Then she told him of the treachery of the old woman, who had taken away their 3 children and hidden them. Then to the king's great joy they were brought forth. As a punishment, the wicked mother-in-law was tied to the stake and burned to ashes. But the king and the queen with her 6 brothers lived many long years in happiness and peace.